warning lights flashed red across the Zephyrian monitoring station as something massive dropped out of nowhere near the edge of their territory. Commander Vexithara rushed to the main screen, her 4 eyes focusing on the readings that made no sense. The object was huge, bigger than their largest battleships, and it had appeared without any of the usual energy signatures that came with faster-than-light travel. "What is that thing?" she asked her science officer, Mordain. The blue-skinned alien worked frantically at his console. "Unknown design, Commander. The ship is 3 kilometers long and appears to be made of materials our sensors cannot identify. It just appeared from what looks like a fold in space itself." Vexithara had been fighting wars for the Zephyrian Empire for over 20 years. She had conquered 12 different species across 4 star systems. Every time the pattern was the same. The aliens would panic, try to fight with their primitive weapons, and then surrender when they saw the power of Zephyrian technology. This should be no different. Send Admiral Kethmora the scanning data. Tell him we have found another species to add to the Empire. 3 billion kilometers away, Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Leviathan, humanity's newest and most advanced warship. The successful test of their experimental fold space drive had brought them to this unknown star system in less than a second. Around him, his crew worked quietly and efficiently at their stations. "Navigation report, Amy," Morrison said to his navigation officer. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez looked up from her console. "We're in the Kepler 442 system, Captain. 3 planets, 2 gas giants, and what appears to be a heavily developed civilization on the second planet. I'm reading massive orbital structures and thousands of ships." Morrison nodded. This was exactly what Earth's deep space reconnaissance had suggested they might find. Humanity had been preparing for this moment for decades, ever since radio telescopes had detected organized signals from this region of space. "Danny, are you picking up any communications?" Morrison asked his communications officer. Communications officer Danny Walsh adjusted his headset. "Yes, sir, lots of chatter on multiple frequencies. The AI is working on translation, but it looks like we've definitely got their attention." "Wait." He paused, listening intently. "Sir, I'm getting what sounds like military communications. They're talking about us." Morrison wasn't surprised. The Leviathan was designed to make an impression. At 3 kilometers long, it was shaped like a massive arrowhead made of dark metal that seemed to absorb light. Every line of the ship spoke of power and purpose. Humanity had learned from every war movie, every science fiction story, and every tactical manual when they designed their first true deep space warship. "Lisa, what's our weapon status?" Morrison asked his weapons officer. Commander Lisa Park checked her displays. "All systems green, Captain. Plasma lance arrays are charged, quantum torpedo bays are loaded, and point defense systems are active. We're ready for anything." Morrison smiled grimly. The Leviathan carried enough firepower to destroy small moons, but he hoped they wouldn't need to use it. Humanity preferred to make friends rather than enemies. Unfortunately, the galaxy didn't always give them that choice. On the alien monitoring station, more ships were arriving. Admiral Kethamora's flagship, a massive vessel bristling with weapons, took position near the unknown ship. The admiral was old even by Zephyrian standards, with scars from a dozen conquered worlds marking his armor. "Have they responded to our hails?" Kethmora asked as he stepped onto his bridge. "No, sir," replied Communications Officer Yelthok. "They appear to be listening, but they haven't transmitted anything back to us." Kethmora studied the readings from the strange ship. Something about it bothered him, but he couldn't identify what. In all his years of conquest, he had never encountered a ship that his sensors couldn't fully analyze. Every species they had met used technology based on the same basic principles. This ship was different. "Send the standard surrender demand," he ordered. "Tell them they have entered Zephyrian space without permission. They must power down their weapons, prepare for boarding, and accept vassalage to the Empire." The message was transmitted on all frequencies in the 20 most common galactic languages. On the Leviathan, Danny Walsh received the transmission and fed it into the ship's AI for translation. The artificial intelligence, which the crew had nicknamed Atlas, worked through the alien grammar and syntax in seconds. "Captain, I've got their message," Walsh reported. "They're demanding our surrender. They want us to power down weapons and prepare to be boarded. They're calling this Zephyrian space and saying we're trespassing." Morrison exchanged glances with his executive officer, Commander Tony Martin. This was the scenario they had trained for, but hoped they would never encounter. First contact with a hostile alien civilization. What do we know about their military capability? Morrison asked. Martin consulted his tactical display. I count 47 ships in their fleet, ranging from small patrol craft to what appears to be battleships. Their weapons appear to be energy-based, similar to our old plasma designs from about 50 years ago. Their shields are using technology we abandoned decades ago. Morrison nodded. Humanity had spent the last century preparing for this moment, ever since they detected the first alien radio signals. While the aliens had been conquering primitive species with inferior technology, humanity had been advancing their science and engineering at an unprecedented rate. The Leviathan represented the peak of human technological achievement. Dr. Stevens, how are our systems holding up? Morrison asked his chief engineer. Dr. Carl Stevens looked up from his engineering station with a slight grin. Everything's running perfectly, Captain. The adaptive armor is already analyzing their sensor scans and adjusting accordingly. Our power core is stable, and all weapon systems are operating at full capacity. We're ready for whatever they want to throw at us. Morrison made his decision. Danny, open a channel to the alien fleet. Channel open, sir. Morrison's voice was calm and professional as he spoke. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earth ship Leviathan. We are explorers from Earth, seeking peaceful contact with other intelligent species. We mean no harm, but we will not surrender our ship or accept vassalage to any empire. If you wish to communicate, we are willing to talk. The message was transmitted back to the Zephyrian fleet, where it was quickly translated and delivered to Admiral Kethmora. The Admiral read the response with growing disbelief. In over 2 decades of conquest, no species had ever refused their initial surrender demand. They refused to surrender? He asked his communications officer. Yes, sir. They claim to be explorers seeking peaceful contact, but they will not give up their ship or accept our authority. Kethmora felt a chill run through his body. Something was very wrong here. Species that were strong enough to refuse Zephyrian demands were supposed to be impossible. The Empire had carefully surveyed this entire region of space. There were no advanced civilizations that posed a threat. Begin detailed scans of their vessel, he ordered. I want to know everything about their technology, their weapons, and their defenses. If they want to resist, we need to know what we're dealing with. The scanning began immediately, but the results would prove to be far more disturbing than Admiral Kethmora could have imagined. The Zephyrian science vessels moved closer to the human ship, their powerful scanners working overtime to analyze the strange vessel. Chief Science Officer Mordain had never seen readings like these in his 30 years of service. The ship's hull appeared to be made of materials that shouldn't exist according to everything he knew about physics and engineering. The outer armor is responding to our scans. Mordain reported to Admiral Kethmora. It's changing its molecular structure in real time, adapting to deflect our sensor beams. I've never seen anything like it. Admiral Kethmora studied the data with growing concern. What do you mean it's adapting? Sir, the hull material is somehow analyzing our scanning frequencies and adjusting itself to block deeper penetration. It's as if the ship itself is learning how to defend against our sensors. On the Leviathan, Dr. Carl Stevens watched the alien scanning attempts with amusement. The ship's adaptive armor was one of humanity's greatest technological achievements, developed after decades of research into smart materials and nanotechnology. The armor could respond to any kind of energy attack, physical impact, or even scanning attempt by restructuring itself at the molecular level. They're trying pretty hard to figure out what we're made of, Stevens reported to Captain Morrison. The armor is handling their scans just fine. In fact, it's learning their scanning frequencies and will be completely immune to them within the next few minutes. Morrison nodded. What about our own scans of their ships? Much more successful, Stevens replied with a grin. Their technology is fairly primitive compared to ours. I'd estimate they're about 50 years behind us in materials science, maybe 70 years behind in power generation and weapons technology. Meanwhile, the Zephyrian scanners had moved on to analyzing the human ship's power signature. Navigation Officer Velthok stared at his displays in disbelief, running the scans over and over to make sure he wasn't making a mistake. Admiral, you need to see this, Velthok called out. The power readings from their ship are impossible. Kethmora moved to the navigation station. What do you mean impossible? Sir, they appear to have contained a miniature star inside their vessel. The energy output is beyond anything we've ever recorded. Our most powerful fusion reactors produce maybe 1% of what their power core is generating. Kethmora felt his blood run cold. A power source that advanced would allow the humans to operate weapons and defensive systems far beyond anything the Zephyrian Empire possessed. Are you certain of these readings? I've checked them 5 times, sir. Their power core is producing enough energy to run our entire home fleet. Just one ship, sir. The scanning continued, and each new discovery was more disturbing than the last. Weapons specialist Zarthek identified what appeared to be multiple weapon systems built into the human vessel's hull. The energy signatures suggested weapons technology that was centuries ahead of anything in the Zephyrian arsenal. They have some kind of plasma lance system that appears to be capable of punching through our strongest shields, Zarthek reported. But that's not the worst part. I'm also detecting what looks like quantum-based weaponry. We don't even have theories about how to build weapons like that. On the human ship, Tactical Officer Ryan Cooper was running his own diagnostics. The Leviathan's weapon systems represented the best of human engineering and innovation. The plasma lance arrays could fire concentrated energy beams hot enough to cut through asteroid fields. The quantum torpedo launchers used principles of physics that most alien species hadn't even discovered yet. All weapon systems are green, Captain, Cooper reported. Plasma lances are charged and ready. Quantum torpedoes are loaded, and the point defense grid is tracking every ship in their fleet. If they try anything aggressive, we can respond immediately. Morrison was pleased but not surprised. Humanity had spent decades preparing for exactly this scenario. Every system on the Leviathan had been tested and retested until it was perfect. What about our defensive systems? Shields are at full power and adaptive protocols are active. If they attack us with energy weapons, the shields will learn to absorb and deflect their specific frequencies. Physical projectiles will be handled by our point defense systems. Dr. Amy Rodriguez, working at the navigation station, had been analyzing the alien fleet's positioning and movement patterns. What she discovered was both encouraging and concerning. Captain, I've been studying their tactical formation, Rodriguez reported. They're using attack patterns that are maybe 100 years old by our standards. Very predictable, very conventional. But sir, there are a lot of them. If they all attack at once, even with our superior technology, we could have problems. Morrison considered this information carefully. Humanity had always known that their first contact with hostile aliens might involve fighting against overwhelming numbers. The Leviathan had been designed with this possibility in mind. Lisa, what's our capability against multiple targets? Morrison asked his weapons officer. Commander Lisa Park consulted her tactical computer. The AI can track and engage up to 3,000 separate targets simultaneously. Our point defense systems can intercept incoming fire from any angle. And if we need to, we can use the wide-beam plasma lances to hit multiple ships at once. The Zephyrian scans were revealing more disturbing information by the minute. Science Officer Mordain discovered that the human ship contained what appeared to be manufacturing facilities. The aliens weren't just carrying weapons. They were apparently capable of building new equipment during battle. Admiral, I'm detecting fabrication units throughout their vessel, Mordain reported with obvious concern. They appear to be capable of manufacturing everything from spare parts to additional weapon systems. They could potentially repair battle damage and upgrade their capabilities while fighting. This revelation shook Admiral Kethmora more than anything else. In all their conquests, the Zephyrians had relied on their ability to wear down enemy forces through sustained attacks. If the humans could repair and upgrade their systems during battle, conventional tactics would be useless. What about their crew? Kethmora asked. How many life forms are we detecting? That's another strange reading, sir. The ship is so large that it should require thousands of crew members, but I'm only detecting about 300 life signs. Most of the ship appears to be automated. On the Leviathan, the crew was indeed small by traditional standards. Advanced automation and artificial intelligence handled most of the ship's operations, leaving the human crew free to focus on strategy, diplomacy, and decision-making. Chief Intelligence Officer Tony Martin was analyzing the alien communications that his systems had intercepted. Captain, I've been listening to their internal communications, Martin reported. They're getting very worried about what they're finding. Their scans are revealing our technological advantages, and they're starting to realize they might be in over their heads. Morrison wasn't surprised. Humanity had built the Leviathan to send a clear message to any hostile aliens they might encounter. The message was simple. Humans were not helpless prey to be conquered easily. What's their overall assessment of our capabilities? Morrison asked. Martin checked his translations. Based on what I'm hearing, they think we have enough firepower to destroy their entire fleet. They're particularly concerned about our power generation and manufacturing capabilities. I don't think they've ever encountered anything like us before. The final scan that broke the Zephyrian confidence came from their long-range sensors. Defensive Systems Analyst Quoven had been trying to determine if the human ship had any backup or support vessels nearby. What he found instead was far more disturbing. Admiral, I've completed the long-range scans, Quoven reported with a trembling voice. Sir, this isn't just one ship. I'm detecting construction signatures in their home system. They're building more of these vessels. Admiral Kethamora stared at the data in horror. One human ship was already more than a match for his entire fleet. The thought of facing multiple vessels with this level of technology was beyond frightening. How many are they building? He asked quietly. Based on the energy signatures and construction patterns, at least 12 more ships of similar or greater capability. The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. The Zephyrian Empire had built its power on technological superiority over primitive species. Now they had encountered a civilization that was far more advanced than they were, and that civilization was rapidly building a fleet of superweapons. For the first time in his military career, Admiral Kethamora realized that the Zephyrian Empire might have finally met an enemy they could not defeat. Admiral Kethamora called an emergency war council aboard his flagship, as the scanning data continued to reveal increasingly troubling information. The conference room filled with his senior officers, each one carrying data tablets filled with analysis of the human vessel. The mood was tense and fearful, something that had never happened during previous conquests. Report on their defensive capabilities, Kethamora ordered his weapons specialist. Zarthek stood and activated the holographic display. A three-dimensional image of the human ship appeared, covered in red warning indicators. Admiral, their shield system operates on principles we don't understand. Our analysis suggests they use multiple overlapping energy fields that actually grow stronger when attacked. What do you mean stronger? Asked Fleet Commander Vexithara. Our computer models show that sustained fire against their shields would actually increase their defensive power. It appears that their shields can absorb energy from incoming attacks and use it to strengthen themselves. The more we shoot at them, the harder they become to damage. The room fell silent. In 20 years of conquest, the Zephyrians had never encountered defensive technology that could turn their own weapons against them. Every species they had defeated used conventional energy shields that would eventually fail under sustained attack. Science Officer Moore Dane added his own disturbing findings. The ship's armor presents another problem. We've identified self-repairing capabilities throughout the hull. Even if we somehow penetrated their shields, any damage we caused would begin healing itself immediately. Kethamora studied the data with growing dread. How long would it take them to repair battle damage? Based on our analysis of their manufacturing capabilities, minor damage would be repaired in minutes. Major structural damage might take an hour or two at most. Admiral, they appear to have redesigned themselves during battle faster than we could inflict damage. Navigation Officer Velthok presented the most disturbing discovery of all. Admiral, we've analyzed their movement capabilities. When they arrived, they used some kind of space-folding technology that allowed them to travel instantly across vast distances. But that's not the worst part. Continue, Kethamora ordered, though he wasn't sure he wanted to hear more bad news. Sir, their maneuvering thrusters are powerful enough to allow them to move that massive ship as if it were a small fighter. They could outrun our fastest ships while maintaining perfect firing solutions on our entire fleet. The implications were terrifying. Zephyrian military doctrine was based on using superior speed and firepower to overwhelm enemy forces. If the humans were faster and more heavily armed, traditional tactics would be useless. Commander Yelthok had been analyzing the human communications and behavior patterns. Admiral, there's something else. Their response to our surrender demand was too calm, too confident. In all our previous conquests, new species showed fear or panic when confronted by our fleet. These humans showed no emotional response at all. What does that suggest? Vexithara asked. Either they're too primitive to understand the threat we represent, or they're so confident in their abilities that they see us as no threat at all. Based on everything else we've discovered, I believe it's the latter. Strategic analyst Quoven had been running battle simulations based on their scanning data. The results were uniformly catastrophic for Zephyrian forces. Admiral, I've run over 3,000 combat scenarios through our tactical computer. In every single simulation we lose, every single one? Kethamora asked in disbelief. Yes, sir. The best-case scenario has us losing 70% of our fleet before we even damage their shields. The worst-case scenarios have us completely destroyed in under 30 seconds. Their firepower is simply too great for us to overcome. The Admiral leaned back in his chair, feeling the weight of command heavier than ever before. What about calling for reinforcements from the home fleet? Quoven consulted his data. Based on our analysis of their weapons capabilities, we would need to bring at least 500 ships to have a reasonable chance of victory. Even then, we would probably lose most of our forces in the process. And if they have support ships nearby? If there are more human vessels in the area, sir, we would need the entire Imperial Navy to have any hope of success. The room fell silent as the officers considered the magnitude of the threat they were facing. For generations, the Zephyrian Empire had built its identity around military conquest and technological superiority. Now they were confronted with a species that made them look primitive by comparison. What do we know about their homeworld? Kethamora asked. Intelligence Officer Rakthol consulted his analysis of intercepted human communications. Sir, based on their transmissions, they call their planet Earth. It appears to be located approximately 200 light-years from here. What's concerning is that their communications references suggest they have a substantial industrial base and population. How substantial? Conservative estimates suggest billions of inhabitants with technological capabilities equal to or greater than what we see on this ship. Admiral, if this vessel represents their standard military capability, their entire civilization could be a threat to the Empire. The discussion was interrupted by an urgent communication from the monitoring station. A junior officer appeared on the screen, clearly agitated. Admiral, we're detecting new energy signatures from the human vessel. They appear to be charging some kind of weapon system that we haven't seen before. On the Leviathan, Captain Morrison had made the decision to give the aliens a small demonstration of human capabilities. He ordered Weapons Officer Lisa Park to power up one of their quantum torpedo launchers, knowing that the energy signature would be detected by alien sensors. Quantum Torpedo Tube 1 is charging, Captain, Park reported. Energy buildup will be clearly visible to their scanners. Morrison wanted to send a message without actually firing. Sometimes the threat of overwhelming force was more effective than using force itself. Back on the Zephyrian flagship, the new energy readings sent panic through the bridge crew. Weapons specialist Zarathek stared at his displays in horror. Admiral, the energy buildup from their weapon system is off the charts. If they fire that thing, it could destroy our entire fleet with a single shot. Admiral Kethamora realized that they had reached a critical moment. The humans were demonstrating their power without actually attacking, giving the Zephyrians a chance to withdraw before things escalated to actual combat. Sir, Communications Officer Yelthok called out. I'm receiving a transmission from the human vessel. Put it through, Kethamora ordered. Captain Morrison's voice came through the speakers, calm and professional. Admiral Kethamora, I believe you have completed your scans of our vessel. You now understand our capabilities. We have no desire for conflict, but we will defend ourselves if attacked. I suggest we find a peaceful solution to this situation. The human captain's tone was not threatening, but the underlying message was clear. They knew exactly how outmatched the Zephyrian fleet was, and they were offering a way out of the confrontation. Admiral Kethamora looked around the room at his officers. Each one of them had the same expression of fear and uncertainty. For the first time in their military careers, they were facing an enemy that was vastly superior to them in every way. What are your recommendations? Kethamora asked his staff. Strategic Analyst Quoven spoke first. Sir, we have two choices. We can attack and be destroyed, or we can withdraw and report our findings to the Empire. If we withdraw, there's a chance that the Empire can develop countermeasures or negotiate some kind of peace treaty. And if we attack, then we all die, and the Empire learns nothing about this new threat until it's too late. The decision was becoming clear, but it was also the most difficult choice of Kethamora's career. Never before had he been forced to retreat without firing a single shot. But the alternative was the complete destruction of his fleet and the loss of critical intelligence about humanity's capabilities. As he considered his options, more reports came in from the scanning teams. Each new piece of information only reinforced how hopeless their situation had become. The humans had built the perfect war machine, and the Zephyrian Empire was completely unprepared to face it. Captain Morrison decided it was time to show the aliens exactly what they were dealing with. He had given them time to scan his ship and reach their own conclusions about human capabilities. Now he wanted to demonstrate that everything their sensors had detected was real and functional. "Kevin, I want you to show our guests what the Leviathan can do," Morrison said to his navigation officer. "Nothing aggressive, just some basic maneuvers that will give them a better understanding of our technology." Lieutenant Kevin Liu smiled as he worked his controls. The Leviathan was 3 kilometers of advanced engineering, but it could move with the grace and precision of a much smaller vessel. "Beginning demonstration sequence, Captain." The massive human warship began to move in ways that defied everything the Zephyrians thought they knew about physics and engineering. Despite its enormous size, the Leviathan executed a perfect barrel roll, spinning along its central axis while maintaining its exact position in space. The maneuver should have been impossible for any ship larger than a fighter. On the alien flagship, Navigation Officer Velthok watched his sensors in disbelief. "Admiral, their ship just performed a complete rotation while maintaining perfect stability. The gravitational forces alone should have torn apart any crew inside. How is that possible?" Admiral Kethamora asked. "Sir, they must have some kind of inertial compensation system that we've never seen before. Their crew isn't experiencing any of the forces that should result from those maneuvers." The demonstration continued as the Leviathan performed a series of increasingly complex movements. It could accelerate to tremendous speeds instantly, then stop just as quickly. It could move sideways, backwards, or in any direction with equal ease. Most disturbing of all, it could change course without turning, simply shifting its direction of travel while maintaining its orientation. Dr. Carl Stevens monitored the ship's performance from the engineering section. Every system was operating perfectly, well within design limits. The Leviathan's inertial dampeners kept the crew comfortable regardless of how extreme their maneuvers became. The gravitic drive could push the ship in any direction without regard to conventional physics. "All systems green, Captain," Stevens reported. "The aliens are getting some very interesting readings from our drive systems. I don't think they've ever seen gravitic manipulation technology before." Morrison nodded. Humanity had made several breakthrough discoveries in physics over the past 50 years. Discoveries that had allowed them to build technology that seemed impossible to less advanced civilizations. "What about our manufacturing capabilities?" "Working perfectly, sir. I've got fabrication units producing spare parts, additional ammunition, and even some upgrades to our sensor systems. If we were in an extended battle, we could keep improving our capabilities while we fought." Meanwhile, the ship's artificial intelligence was working quietly in the background, analyzing every piece of data they were receiving from the alien fleet. Atlas had already decoded their communications, mapped their ship designs, and begun developing countermeasures for every weapon system in the Zephyrian arsenal. "Atlas, what's your assessment of the alien fleet?" Morrison asked the AI. The artificial intelligence responded in its calm, emotionless voice. "Captain, I have identified 47 distinct vessel types in their fleet. All use technology that is approximately 50 to 70 years behind current human standards. I have developed targeting solutions for every ship and identified their most vulnerable points. How long would it take to disable their entire fleet? If ordered to disable rather than destroy, I estimate 23 seconds. Complete destruction would require only 14 seconds. Morrison was impressed but not surprised. Atlas represented the pinnacle of human artificial intelligence, capable of processing information and making calculations at speeds that no biological mind could match. The AI had been specifically designed to handle multiple simultaneous combat situations. Chief Medical Officer Dr. Nina Walsh had been monitoring the biological scans of the alien crews. "Captain, I've been analyzing their atmospheric samples and biological data. If they tried to use any kind of biological weapons against us, I've already developed countermeasures. Our medical fabrication units could produce antidotes within minutes. The human preparations were thorough and comprehensive. Every possible threat had been anticipated and countered. Commander Lisa Park had been tracking every alien ship with her targeting systems, maintaining perfect firing solutions even as the Leviathan performed its demonstration maneuvers. Captain, our weapon systems have been locked onto every ship in their fleet since first contact," Park reported. "The targeting computers are automatically adjusting for their movements, shield configurations, and structural weak points. If you give the order, we can engage all targets simultaneously. Morrison studied his tactical display. The Zephyrian ships were maintaining their formation, but he could see the stress in their positioning. They were trying to stay ready for battle while clearly being intimidated by what they were seeing. "Tony, what are you hearing from their communications?" Morrison asked his intelligence officer. Chief Intelligence Officer Tony Martin had been monitoring alien transmissions throughout the encounter. "Sir, they're discussing retreat. Their analysis of our capabilities has them seriously concerned. They're also mentioning something about reporting back to their empire about us." This was exactly what Morrison had expected. The Leviathan wasn't just a warship, it was a statement. Humanity was announcing to the galaxy that Earth would not be an easy target for conquest or intimidation. What else are they saying? "They're calling us a apex predator species, sir. Their military leadership is realizing that they've encountered something completely outside their experience. They're also discussing the implications for their empire if there are more ships like ours." Morrison allowed himself a small smile. The aliens were drawing the correct conclusions from their encounter. Humanity had indeed built more ships like the Leviathan, and each new vessel incorporated improvements and advances that made it even more capable than the last. Dr. Amy Rodriguez had been analyzing the alien fleet's tactical positioning throughout the encounter. "Captain, their formation is showing signs of stress. They're maintaining combat readiness, but they're also positioning themselves for a quick retreat. I think they're preparing to withdraw." "What's your assessment of their combat doctrine?" "Very conventional, sir. They appear to rely on overwhelming numbers and sustained firepower to defeat their enemies. Their tactics are probably very effective against less advanced species, but they wouldn't work well against us." Morrison considered the situation carefully. The aliens had scanned his ship, witnessed demonstrations of human technology, and reached their own conclusions about the threat humanity represented. Now it was time to see what they would do with that information. "Danny, have they made any attempt to negotiate or establish formal diplomatic contact?" Morrison asked his communications officer. Communications Officer Danny Walsh checked his systems. "No, sir, just military communications. They haven't tried to open diplomatic channels or request any kind of formal meeting. I think they're still in military assessment mode." The demonstration continued for another 20 minutes. The Leviathan showed off its defensive capabilities by allowing the aliens to target it with low-power sensor locks, then demonstrating how quickly it could break those locks and disappear from their screens using advanced stealth technology. It showed its speed by traveling to the edge of the star system and back in a matter of minutes. Most impressively, it demonstrated its manufacturing capabilities by producing and launching a small reconnaissance drone, building it from raw materials during the course of the encounter. The drone performed its own series of maneuvers before returning to the Leviathan and being recycled back into raw materials. On the alien flagship, the demonstration had achieved its intended effect. Admiral Kethmora and his officers had seen enough to understand that they were completely outclassed in every category. The humans had superior weapons, defenses, speed, maneuverability, and manufacturing capability. "Sir," Strategic Analyst Quoven reported, "based on everything we've observed, I recommend immediate withdrawal. This species represents a threat to the entire Empire. We need to report our findings and let the Imperial Council decide how to respond." Admiral Kethmora knew that Quoven was right. The demonstration had been a clear message from the humans. They were not interested in conquest, but they were absolutely prepared to defend themselves against any threat. The choice for the Zephyrian Empire was simple: find a way to coexist peacefully with humanity, or face a war they could not win. As Captain Morrison watched the alien fleet's formation begin to shift into a withdrawal pattern, he reflected on what had just occurred. Humanity had just announced its presence to a hostile galaxy, and the message had been received loud and clear. The age of easy conquest was over, and Earth was ready for whatever came next. The emergency session of the Zephyrian War Council lasted for 3 hours, as Admiral Kethmora and his officers analyzed every piece of data they had collected about the human warship. The final conclusion was unanimous and terrifying. They had encountered a species that could end the Zephyrian Empire. "The tactical analysis is complete," Strategic Analyst Quoven announced to the assembled officers. "The human vessel represents a completely different approach to warfare than anything we've encountered. Where we build specialized ships for specific roles, they have created a single platform that can handle any combat situation. Admiral Kethamora studied the comprehensive report that had been prepared. Every section contained disturbing revelations about human capabilities. Explain what you mean by different approach. Sir, every species we've conquered follows the same basic pattern. They build ships for specific purposes. Fighters for speed, cruisers for balanced combat, battleships for heavy assault, support vessels for logistics. The humans have created one ship that does everything better than our specialized vessels. Weapons specialist Zarthak added his analysis. Admiral, their weapons technology is not just advanced, it's revolutionary. They're using principles of physics that we're only beginning to understand. Their quantum torpedo system could destroy any target in our fleet with a single shot. What about their defensive capabilities? Completely revolutionary, sir. Their shields don't just deflect attacks, they learn from them and adapt. Their armor repairs itself faster than we could damage it, and their point defense systems could intercept every missile and projectile we could fire at them. Simultaneously, Fleet Commander Vexthara had been analyzing the broader implications of their discovery. Admiral, this isn't just about one ship. If humanity has built vessels of this capability, it means their entire civilization has achieved technological advancement beyond anything in our empire. The room fell silent as the officers considered what this meant for their future. Science Officer Mordain broke the silence with perhaps the most disturbing observation of all. Sir, based on our analysis of their manufacturing capabilities, they don't need large industrial facilities to build these ships. They appear to be capable of constructing advanced technology using compact fabrication systems. They could build fleets anywhere. Admiral Kethamora realized that the traditional Zephyrian strategy of attacking enemy industrial centers would be useless against humanity. If humans could build warships anywhere, they could never be completely defeated through conventional military action. What about their numbers? Kethamora asked. How many ships like this could they have? Intelligence Officer Rakthol consulted his analysis of intercepted human communications. Sir, we detected references to at least 12 additional vessels under construction in their home system. But given their manufacturing capabilities, they could potentially build hundreds or thousands of these ships if they chose to. The implications were staggering. The Zephyrian Empire controlled 12 star systems and maintained fleets of thousands of ships. But if humans could build vessels that were individually superior to entire Zephyrian fleets, numerical superiority would be meaningless. There's something else, Communications Officer Yelthok added quietly. Their captain's communications suggested that this ship was sent as an explorer, not a conqueror. If this represents their exploration technology, we can only imagine what their actual military vessels must be capable of. Admiral Kethamora felt a chill run through his body. The idea that the Leviathan might not even represent humanity's best military technology was almost too frightening to consider. After hours of analysis and discussion, Chief Strategist Quoven presented the final assessment. Admiral, we have only two realistic options. We can attack them and be destroyed, providing no intelligence to the Empire about this new threat, or we can withdraw and report our findings, giving the Empire a chance to develop new strategies for dealing with humanity. What if we attack with our full fleet? Sir, based on our combat simulations, even our entire fleet would be insufficient. We would need to deploy the full might of the Imperial Navy, and even then we would suffer catastrophic losses, and that's assuming they only have one ship in the area. The decision was the most difficult of Kethamora's military career, but it was also the most important. The survival of the Zephyrian Empire might depend on the intelligence they could provide about humanity's capabilities. Prepare the fleet for withdrawal, he ordered. But first I want to send a message to the human captain. The message was transmitted to the Leviathan on all frequencies. Captain Morrison received it with interest, having Atlas translate the alien communication immediately. Captain, this is Admiral Kethamora of the Zephyrian Empire. We have completed our assessment of your vessel and capabilities. We recognize that humanity represents a significant advancement in technology and military capability. We do not wish to engage in hostilities with your species. We request permission to withdraw from this system and report our findings to our government. Morrison considered the request carefully. The aliens had behaved aggressively initially, but they had shown wisdom in recognizing when they were outmatched. Danny, open a channel. This is Captain Morrison. Admiral Kethamora, You and your fleet are free to withdraw. However, I want to make something clear. Humanity seeks peaceful relationships with all intelligent species. We have no desire to conquer or dominate others, but we will defend ourselves and our allies against any aggression. The message was received and acknowledged by the Zephyrian fleet. As the alien ships began to power their faster-than-light drives, Admiral Kethamora transmitted one final communication. Captain Morrison, I must warn you that there are other species in this galaxy that may not be as reasonable as my empire has chosen to be today. Your demonstration of power has been noted, but it will also be seen as a challenge by some civilizations. Morrison understood the warning. Humanity had just announced itself as a major power in galactic politics, and not all reactions would be peaceful. We appreciate the warning, Admiral. Humanity is prepared to defend itself against any threat. As the Zephyrian fleet disappeared into faster-than-light travel, Captain Morrison called his senior staff together for their own assessment of the encounter. Analysis, people. What did we learn from our first contact with hostile aliens? Dr. Carl Stevens spoke first. Captain, our technology performed exactly as designed. The demonstration clearly showed them that we're not an easy target for conquest. I think we sent the right message. Commander Tony Martin had been analyzing the intercepted alien communications. Sir, based on what I heard from their internal discussions, they're genuinely afraid of us. But they're also impressed. I think there's potential for peaceful relationships if we handle future contacts carefully. Chief Intelligence Officer Tony Martin presented perhaps the most important information. Captain, I intercepted references to something called the Zephyrian Empire that apparently controls multiple star systems. This wasn't just a single hostile species. It was representatives of an interstellar empire that conquers other civilizations. Morrison nodded grimly. This was exactly what Earth's leadership had feared when they authorized the deep space exploration program. The galaxy was full of hostile civilizations that viewed other species as potential subjects for conquest. What else did you learn about their empire? Sir, they've apparently conquered 12 different species across 4 star systems. Their entire civilization is built around military conquest and technological superiority over primitive species. Until today, they had never encountered a species that was more advanced than they were. Dr. Amy Rodriguez added her tactical assessment. Captain, their withdrawal was orderly and professional. They're soldiers, not pirates or raiders. When they realized they were outmatched, they chose to retreat rather than fight a hopeless battle. That suggests they might be reasonable to deal with in the future. Morrison was pleased with how the encounter had been handled, but he was also aware that it represented only the beginning of humanity's interactions with galactic civilization. Danny, prepare a full report for Earth Command. Include everything we learned about the Zephyrian Empire, their technology, and their territorial claims. Earth needs to know what we're dealing with out here. As the Leviathan began its journey back to Earth, Morrison reflected on what had just occurred. Humanity had successfully defended itself in its first encounter with hostile aliens, but they had also declared themselves a player in galactic politics. The peaceful expansion of human civilization had just become a race to prepare for the conflicts that were now inevitable. Meanwhile, Admiral Kethamora's fleet traveled toward the Zephyrian homeworld carrying news that would change the Empire forever. For the first time in their history, they had encountered a species that was completely beyond their ability to conquer. The age of easy expansion was over, and the galaxy had a new apex predator. The only question now was whether the Zephyrian Empire would choose to adapt to this new reality, or challenge it and face destruction.